Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the latest edition of A Wild Vision. And today we are going to be talking about travel in the post-COVID era, and we're going to be talking to industry expert Michael Snedic right after this, so stick with us. Hello, Michael.
Hello, Rob. Good to be here.
How are you?
Yeah, really well, thanks. No, doing
Good.
well, and I've been looking forward to this, so the time has arrived. Yeah, fantastic.
Absolutely. Okay. Before we get going, I'll just, there's just a couple of things that I want to let people know about. So,
Great.
first thing to say is, this thing exists for you to interact and ask Michael any questions that you might have. I mean, now that hopefully the global pandemic seems to be calming down a little bit, and a bit of travel's now possible again, do take the opportunity to ask Michael any questions that you might have. I mean, I know from people that I know that they're all starting to think about travel again. It's all happening. It's things are opening up, which is great. I think we've all suffered quite a lot over the last couple of years. So do take this opportunity to talk to Michael. The other thing I wanted to say just quickly, and I'll just bring up a slide for everybody, is that the next live is actually this Thursday, so that's the 24th. It's going to be at 6:30 p.m. GMT, so UK time, and I'm going to be talking to Emily Millhouse from Frog Life, and we're going to be talking about one of my favorite subjects, which is toads. Well, toads and other amphibians. As I think most people know that sort of watch and tune into this regularly, I run the local toad patrol in the village here, so toads is quite close to my heart, and so I'm really looking forward to talking to Emily. So do tune in for that, and I'm sure she'll come up with some surprising toad facts that you didn't know. So, and she's available for you to ask any questions as well. So do tune in on Thursday at 6:30. Right, let me just get rid of that. So Michael, why don't you start by just introducing yourself and telling people a little bit about you and your history in the industry and that sort of thing.
As you can hear by my accent, I'm an Aussie, and I live in Brisbane in Queensland. And I've been photographing now. I'm into my 26th year. And as much as I appreciate all types of photography, I am nature-based, some landscapes, macro, but a lot of wildlife. I'm a lover of birds. And I started up in a place called Lamington National Park in the Gold Coast hinterland, World Heritage listed, and was trained. I guess my mentor was an incredible documentary maker and wildlife photographer, a fellow called Glenn Trelfo. He's been commissioned by BBC to help with docos. And I've been teaching now for close on 19 years as well, starting out with some local workshops. And then, of course, for many years now, I'll say pre-COVID, and it's going to happen again soon, which we'll be talking about. But traveling all around the world, to the poles, through Central India, Africa, etc. I write for magazines as well. I've been writing for Australia's highest-selling magazine, Australian Photography, since 2006. I'm actually writing another one tomorrow. I judge a lot of competitions. It's a big part of my life. We've had some chats back and forth with Rob as well. During the pandemic, honestly, my photography, rather than look at it as a negative, there has been a lot of suffering and heartache for a lot of people. But the one great thing, certainly for me and many of my friends, is the mind-blowing amount of photography that I've done compared to what I normally can. So, but yeah, that's a very quick background on myself. So yeah, thanks, Rob.
Yeah, and isn't it amazing how much we've sort of rediscovered what's on our doorsteps as well. I mean, I've said this, many times before in these lives, but I've almost taken the decision again this year with, you know, inflation going through the roof in the UK and fuel prices, you know,
Oh, I've
going up,
heard.
is
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
stay a little bit more local again, simply because of
Yes.
that. Because it's, you
Exactly.
know, I mean, I filled the car up the other day and it cost me £70. You just
Oh
think,
my goodness.
you know,
Yeah.
it's how much, you know, how many times can you fill the car up in a month like
Well,
that?
us
It's,
us
yeah.
Aussies have been very fortunate. I mean, we've always thought, compared to Europe, compared to the UK,
Hmm.
you know, fuel isn't bad. But for us, this week, for example, to be paying close to $2 Australian, we're like, what is
Yeah.
going on? A year ago, during the pandemic,
And-
it dropped down to 96 cents. So
yeah.
it's doubled. But yeah, a lot more people. I'm seeing things on, of course, on Facebook and Insta, and there's a lot of local stuff happening, which is really good to see, as well
Yeah.
as people getting ready now and preparing to travel as well.
Yeah, which is great. But I always think, you know,
Mm.
when you work locally, it really prepares you for those moments when you know, we'll get on to talking about that in a bit, where,
Yes.
you know,
Yep.
you go somewhere new, you encounter, you know, all these species that you've been longing to photograph for such a long time, and
Exactly.
it prepares you for those opportunities to get the most out of them,
Yep.
by
Yep.
practicing on local stuff. So yeah, so pre-COVID, I mean, that when you look back 2 years before, you know, COVID completely sort of knocked us off our feet.
Yes.
Isn't it strange to think back on those times now and realize how free we all were, and how
Absolutely.
easy everything was? It puts it
Yep.
into perspective,
Yeah,
doesn't it?
it does. I was one of the very fortunate ones, and I was presenting a photography tour to Antarctica, and I arrived back in Australia in the last week of February. So pretty much, I got back. I'd heard that things are not good, COVID, and it all hit the fan. I kind of
Yeah.
escaped. One of my cohorts that runs photo tours, he missed on getting back to Ushuaia. They shut completely shut. They missed out by a couple of hours and had many weeks at sea trying to find a port. And then they got on shore. Then they had to get accommodation. Then there were no flights. But pre-COVID, I mean, of course, that it's like take your pick. Look at the seasons,
Yeah.
see what people are after, where are the best wildlife or landscape locations, talk to your travel agent, book it, and away you went. Whereas, as we'll be talking, you know, a little bit further on, Rob, of course, things have changed. But one thing I think you and I and many other people, we really appreciate how easy it was. And now I guess you've got to jump
Yeah.
through a lot more hoops. Thankfully, most places around the world, things are opening up. We know
Yeah.
that. We can only hope. But you're right. Before that, it was really choosing a destination, planning and booking it, and away you went.
Exactly.
So,
I mean, but isn't it so, you know, things are so different in different countries around the world. I mean, you know, in the UK, we're pretty, you know, we're pretty restriction free now.
yep,
You know,
yep,
things seem to be under control in terms of the numbers. You know, the vaccination program has been very successful. But then I talked to Gail Bisson the other day, and, you know, things
yep.
are sort of locked down, you know, where she is in Nova Scotia in Canada. You know,
Oh,
and I know,
yes.
and you
Yep.
know, and I know things have been, depending on which state you are in Australia, things have been quite difficult until fairly recently,
Absolutely.
haven't they?
If you're, for example, I mean, if you're from Western Australia, you still, it's literally, we're calling it a separate country. They've seceded. That's how we're viewing
Yeah.
it. A lot of us East Coast Aussies, completely. Like, you cannot get in. If you do get in, you've got to spend 2 weeks in hotel quarantine. You've got to pay for it. It's unbelievable. Other states opened up. Thankfully, of course, in Queensland, we had months and months of zero, which is hard to people from the UK and around the world to even believe. But once we opened up, we started getting a lot more cases. But the good news for us in Queensland, was that it was Omicron, and thankfully, not as severe, nowhere near the amount of hospital cases, nowhere near the amount of deaths. And,
Yeah.
you know, the way things are going, we can hope it's looking good. We hope that some crazy, nasty variant doesn't appear that's going to be bang and hit us again, but it's certainly going in the right direction. Having spoken to a few epidemiologists and others, and, you know, it's looking good. And personally, I mean, I've never been busier. The last 5, 6 weeks, it's
Yeah.
just non-stop of bookings and inquiries, and people have got that confidence back. I
Yeah. I
feel
mean,
that.
and there's probably this sort of this things have built up, haven't they, over because people haven't been
Yes.
able to do anything
Yes.
for so
Yep.
long. There's this build up of and a rush that's going to come. This is what
Yep.
I think is going to happen, because people are going to, I'm fed up with staying here. I want to,
That's right.
my travel lust is getting the better of me, and I need to travel. So
Exactly.
there's this built up demand, this pent up demand, which I
There
think
is, and
is probably going to hit you.
Yeah, no, I agree. And even a few people have mentioned recently, it's very obvious, but when people say, we've had nothing to spend our money on, we're normally at the movies, seeing concerts, going twice, blah, 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 overseas,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden there's 2 years worth. So my biggest problem now, and I say this with a smile, it's not a problem, but I've got tours booked out where people can't get on. There's a waiting list, and it's suddenly, it's like all or nothing. But hey, I'm not complaining. It's a good place to be.
Well, I mean, it's good, particularly. I mean, we were going to talk about the initial effects of the pandemic and
Yep.
lockdown, and for you in the sort of travel industry, I mean, that must have been incredibly concerning. I mean, because we
I can tell you,
didn't know where it was going. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And then look, I mean, I don't lie. I've got nothing to hide. But for about probably 3-4 weeks in March, April 2020, I was absolutely down and out. I just thought, this is it. I mean, I've worked and worked so incredibly hard to get to a position of envy for a lot of people. I mean, look at the work I do. Of course, I work hard and long hours, but that comes with the territory. But I just thought, this is it. What do I do? Like, it's all over. And then I thought, I can either roll over and die, metaphorically, in other words, just give up the business side, or I can be positive. And I turned it around. And some of our chats, Rob, you'll know, all of a sudden I thought, well, I've got more time with my wife. I've got more time to, as I mentioned earlier, to photograph, to write articles, to read books, to watch things on Netflix, work. We've got a bit of a pole home here, eye level with the birds and the trees, and I'm enjoying working in the yard. I'm reading more books.
Yeah.
And 2 years is a long time, but now I feel that I'm completely recharged. I'm ready. If all goes well, and I'm talking obviously COVID, I'm on the roller coaster, and right through till early next year, like, it's going to be fantastic. I'm looking forward to it. But I've had a break, and I do running. I'm a trail runner, so I've been running. I've been entering events, things that I normally can't do because I'm away. So it's been there have been positives, but a lot of heartache, people have lost loved ones. There have been people unbelievably ill and people with long COVID. It's all obvious. We know what the travel industry around the world, the airlines, the cafes, the restaurants, you can go on and on. I mean, the world's been hammered, but when you start seeing signs of things coming back,
Those sort of green shoots, almost, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's a gratitude. I'm very grateful. I really am. Rather than just accepting that, okay, in June I'm going to Svalbard, which will be my first overseas trip running a tour in 2.5 years. But it's now, and I've been quite a few times, but now it's like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm going to Svalbard. Whereas normally I'd be, this is great. Do what you do, look after your guests, take some photos, and then on to the next trip. Whereas it's incredible when you haven't got something for a while. Boy, oh boy, it's I'm very appreciative.
Well, it's almost like the sort of freedom, isn't it? You're getting your freedom back
exactly,
again.
Exactly.
In lockdown, it was. I mean, I'm dreadfully fortunate, much more fortunate than a lot of people. And I really felt for people that were in perhaps sort of high-rise flats and those sorts of places.
Yep.
I mean, I've got, well, as people will know, they've watched some of the videos that I've been making recently, but 100 acres of woodland up the path. So my hour's worth of exercise was, I could go and lose myself in there, and for a few weeks it didn't really matter. In a way, I kind of enjoyed it because there was no pressure to do any of the other stuff that I've been doing. And of course, for me, when the pandemic arrived, it was kind of wild art was born. So there are some good things to have come out of it, but there are a lot of people that have suffered terribly, and obviously losing loved ones and everything. How can you square that circle properly? It's very, very difficult. But
and sometimes things happen, like you were saying, Rob, where you are, you're fortunate. And my wife Dina and I mean, we basically bought this kind of pole home surrounded by bush and eucalypt I mentioned earlier, and 30-second walk from the forest. That was 1 year earlier, and honestly, if I was in lockdown in like a unit or apartment or something like that, without a veranda balcony, that's tough.
Yeah.
Whereas I had verandas on two sides. I'm at eye level with the treetops. I mean, I was fortunate, really. There's no other way to put it. And boy, oh boy, my different portfolios have been out. I've been obviously doing a lot of photography, even at home, doing macro and photographing birds. And yeah, so it's been, again, I'm trying to make positives out of a situation.
I mean, I think there's always an opportunity to photograph something, doesn't matter where you are. But obviously, when that feeling of, I think travel is not just about the animals that you're going to encounter and hopefully going to photograph. It's just being somewhere different. It's that sort of excitement that it just builds, doesn't it? And it's and that's what people love, I think. But there's always something to photograph, even if you've done it a million times before. I think you can do it in a different way, and that's something that wild art exists, in part to try and encourage people to look at. But as I said to everybody, we've got Michael here, so do pop some questions in the chat if you've got any for him, or do just even say hello. So I know there's a few people on. I can see from the screen. So do just pop by, say hello, and just do take the opportunity to ask Michael questions, because that's what we put these things on for. Is for your benefit. So. So how do you think COVID has sort of changed the industry? Has it changed? Has it sort of changed people's approach to things, the industry's approach to travel, or how do you see it?
Sure, and I can't answer for everyone, of course. And this is either my experience, the operators that I'm dealing with, or some of my guest customers, that have been with me for a while. They're always, when you get reports of deaths and COVID, long COVID, and people are nervous. So even when our borders in some states started opening up, people are nervous. But like you said earlier, Rob, with a lot of precautions in place, I mean, with sort of social distancing, wearing masks, using sanitizer, that kind of thing. But also in the type of work that I do, which is I don't do indoor workshops. So there is less of a risk in that sense, where you're with people, but you're outside, you're not in an enclosed space. But certainly, and at the moment, Africa's out for us for a while, us Aussies, places like that. But I'm seeing some of the photographers and tutors I've known for a while. They're out there, they're touring, things are happening. I have an operator here that specialises. They look after all my African photo tours. And pretty much they were saying that now there are so many things in place to absolutely make it as well. You can't guarantee, but just all the steps to make it possible that you can enjoy, that you're not in there mixed with people without masks. Like, there are so many protocols, which is a lot of work and a lot of expense. But I read through and I thought, this is great. I mean, they are heading in the right direction. And places around the world, they want the business, the tourism.
Of course.
And again, I'm talking within Australia now. Absolutely no question. I mean, not just the bookings, but the confidence, the amount of, I'm back to what I call the good old days and the bad old days, where I'm kind of on that wonderful mouse wheel, and I haven't had that for 2 years. The last month has been incredible, and lots of people have got that confidence to travel. With me, for example, anyone that goes on any of my tours within Australia needs to be double vaccinated and have a booster. It's now written in the agreement. I haven't had any issues with anyone. There might be the odd person who won't agree. That's fine. But they're just some of the things to try to help people relax a little bit. You've got masks there handy if people need them, if we are close. But I'm seeing a lot of things happening. I know that Andy Rouse, we talked about, he went to Finland, recently. People are traveling. Is it David Tippling? I'm trying to think. One of the fellows in Africa. It's
I know Josh went to Africa.
Oh, Josh, sorry.
Yeah, Josh went to Africa. But this is the thing, isn't it? And I think this is the confusing thing for a lot of people, is the way that the restrictions change quite quickly. It's a very dynamic situation that we've got.
Yeah.
Because I think Josh managed to go, this is a good example actually, because I think Josh managed to go to Africa just before Omicron sort of it became, the dominant strain. And as he got back, things were sort of closing up again. So it's this sort of uncertainty, I think, which is the major problem. And I think if we had, if we had this sort of situation where things were sort of stable, we've got this disease with us, but things weren't shifting in terms of the sort of new variants that keep on coming through, then it makes things a little easier. But when it's so unpredictable, that I think is the difficulty. And I think that's what's perhaps holding some people back, because it's, I know of somebody else, one of our other judges, I won't say who, but, had a situation where losing money on flights, for example, when COVID restrictions were changing, and there are all these sorts of fears, and it's a question of how the industry deals with that. I think it's a really difficult one, because how do you, as an operator yourself, how do you go about trying to sort of work that into the equation when you're sort of planning a trip? Is it just, well, you can't, because you just don't know what's going to happen.
Look, I love when you said that. Do you factor that into the equation? No. I say to people, I don't want the violins to come out, but the amount of work, the unbelievable amount of work, basically, I say for nothing, because the planning and then the postponing, and I've had trips that are now into their third year, and there's a number of them overseas and locally, tours, and you plan them, you organize, and then things fall apart, and then you try to do the right thing with people, of course, with the financial side. But when you're earning a third of the money and doing double the work, it's hard. And I mean, if you tack on, you just think from now to 3 months' time, it's a fair while. That's been 2 long years. But I think those of us that have sort of survived and kept positive, there's now, because I haven't done an overseas tour since COVID, since we literally weren't allowed out anyhow. And now that's all changed recently. But within Australia, honestly, Rob, I dodged bullets. I mean, I did a trip to the Northern Territory. I did a tour with 2 guides and a driver, one of my best earners in a long time, like a great trip. And 4 days later, after coming back, Darwin, the capital city of Northern Territory, was in lockdown. I then went to Mackay, Northern Queensland. A number of camera clubs got together and paid me. Honestly, within a week of coming back, Brisbane was in lockdown. Then I missed Lord Howe Island. Then I missed Subantarctic. Then I missed, and then I got, so literally it's been playing Dodgem cars for 2 years. And selling more photos, writing articles, doing things here and there, just to keep the income going. I'm a Nikon school tutor here in Queensland. Even they've had to be very careful. There's been months of just no workshops. And then now, of course, we're talking again, we're planning. But you're right, that uncertainty, it is very tough. But what I suggest to people very strongly, if you're planning to, from wherever you are in the world, if you're planning to go overseas, for example, please, really important, talk to your local agent or do the Google thing. But you need to know what are the restrictions. Do you need a PCR, COVID test 72 hours before you land? Do you need a RAT test, which in some cases you then need the rapid antigen, we call them the RAT test, before you then get on board a ship, let's say in the Arctic, I'm talking about, or Svalbard.
That's the equivalent of our lateral flow, I guess, which is what we call it.
Sure, we call them RATs, rapid antigen tests. So you can get a result within 15 minutes of,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've got test kits here at home, and we do it sort of fairly regularly.
And I think what it is, though, there are some people that are born to travel. 2 whole years, and as I said, they're jumping at the bit. They're absolutely ready to go. And it's that phrase I said, jumping through hoops, but making sure you do your research. I'll tell you just a quick example. I normally book whatever company, and I fly, flights I'm referring to. This year, I only booked a month ago for Oslo. And then, of course, Longyearbyen, the little town, and that's where the ships leave from. I've booked with Emirates, and it's more expensive, but it's flexible. So I won't lose my money. If there's COVID issues, you get your money back. You've got credit. And I'm saying to my guests as well, go that little bit extra, but it's peace of mind. The fact that everybody will need to be clear and will be tested before you get on the ship, then you as the person that may be interested, that gives people a bit more hope. Like, okay, we're not on a normal cruise ship where they go to all these little islands and 1,000, 2,000 people hop off. And guess what? Nearly every cruise ship that I'm hearing of, major cruise ship, are massacred with COVID. There's been a lot of them. The expedition ships we go on, we leave and we don't go to any towns. You can appreciate Svalbard and the Arctic. But with a bit of prior planning and going with a company that takes it seriously, I just think it's exciting. And like you said earlier, Rob, how wonderful is it that we can look forward to these things and really kind of go, wow, we are fortunate, rather than not take it for granted, but kind of just accept, like, okay, I'm off to wherever, that's great. Whereas now it really is, because you're putting in that extra effort, paying that little bit more money. But guess what? I mean, it'll be sweet. It'll be so sweet when I'm finally on that ship, for example, and off we go. So
I think a lot, talking about the tests, myself included, people are a little bit nervous about those, what they involve. Because I think we've all got used to shoving things up our noses.
Yes,
over the last year or two, but I know that the sort of lateral flow tests are sort of relatively easy, but they're not quite as accurate as the as the more in depth tests. But tell people that don't know, what that sort of what the test involves and when you need to take it. I mean, I know the rules and regulations change between destinations and with different companies and whatever, but as a sort of rule of thumb, what does that test involve?
Sure. So I can give a good example. Good friends of ours, the wife went back to see an ailing mother in Scotland recently. So she had to get a PCR test. So that's a proper test where it gets sent to a lab. The results are guaranteed. You pay for that, but the results are guaranteed. They're back within 24 hours. Then you need to show that before you get on the plane. And of course, they'll check that at the other end. And that's generally something like that is and then on the way back as well. I mean, there are different ways of doing this, but with the rapid antigen, as we call them, the RAT test that you do yourself, a lot of companies now will include those as part of luring and enticing people in, rather than you having to buy them. Where do you get them? How much are they? But the whole idea of you getting a proper test, so you know that people on the plane have been tested and are clear, otherwise they wouldn't get on the plane. I think that's one thing where people can feel a little bit more confident. Of course, you wear your masks, you do all the normal things, the sanitizer, and wash your hands thoroughly. But when you get to the other end, then once again, it depends on the country you're going to. I've got a really great friend in Ireland, and they were in lockdown for so long, months and months. They're open, Ireland's open. It's just happening. So, but if you're doing tours and let's say you're going on safari, well, a lot of the companies, I mean, from the way that from what I'm hearing and reading, picked up at the airport, and the guide will wear the mask, and you've got the test at the beginning, and like everything's being put in place to minimize exposure in any way, shape or form. And if I was doing tours, around the cities, let's say I was doing a 2-week photographic tour around Europe, what a great idea, sure, but it is so difficult. It would be very difficult still, the way things are. But just to elaborate, the fact that it's outdoors, the fact that we are not in an enclosed space, and then when you are, and I think it's good for people to have an option. If they feel safer in a safari vehicle, they can wear a mask, or you might only have a couple of people at sort of either end. And generally, and I've heard some very good stories. I mean, there's, I think they're working their way out, but they're working their way through this. But the companies that want your business, I deal with Quark Expeditions. They do the polar trips, and they've got things in place. Like they'll even let you know on the way back for us, let's say, where you need to get a test. They'll organise that, so it takes the difficulty out of the equation.
Yeah, because I mean, as we keep saying, I mean, every country seems to be different, and it seems
Absolutely.
the way I look at it, it looks like a bit like a minefield. And you think, oh, I mean, Jennifer and I are thinking
Yes.
about going to Sri Lanka in at the end of the year because I
Yep.
can't spend another Christmas,
Yeah,
in the
exactly.
UK because it's just so dull and horrible. You need to have
Yep.
something to look forward
Yeah.
to. So yeah,
Sure.
we'll deal with whatever requirements
Yep.
at the time. But it is a bit of a minefield.
Yep.
Michael, are you seeing any comments on your screen? Because I haven't seen any comments come through, and I'm just
No,
wondering
I
whether
haven't.
that.
No.
Okay. So if somebody watching wants to just put a comment in the comments box, that would be really appreciated. Just say hello or something. I just want to check that that's actually working properly, because normally we get quite a few comments coming in and people saying hi, which I haven't seen. I just want to make sure that's working. Should we share a few pictures? Because you did send me a few, and I'm conscious that we've been prattling on and not showing any of your images.
No,
So
go for it, please.
I hope people enjoyed the sort of African vibe on the intro. Ah, there we go. Naomi
Oh,
Stoller says
hello.
hello
Hey.
from me. Hello, Naomi.
Hey,
Hope you're
Naomi.
well. And I hope the storm didn't batter you too badly the other day, because I think I think Naomi's down in Devon or something. So yeah. And the West Country really copped it. We copped it. Well, we were talking the other day, weren't we? And the storm was coming in. Michael and I had a
Absolutely.
quick sort of a sort of pre-Zoom chat or messenger chat, didn't
Yes.
we, the other day? And the storm was
Before you
coming in at
share,
the time. Yeah.
absolutely. Before you share an image or two, that was the irony. Remember, we talked about that here in Queensland and Brisbane on the East Coast. We previous years, I mean, easily 3-4 nights a week, you get the storm, late afternoon storm. And this year we've had a lot of rain, but not many big storms. It's been a lot cooler. But then when I was saying to you just before we clicked on here live, some of the footage I've seen has been unbelievable in the UK. Like
no,
beyond.
I've not known anything since. Well, I can remember 1987. I actually
Wow.
slept through that storm. It came in overnight, unbelievably.
Yeah.
But that's probably the last time I can remember something severe. We've got a town in Kent called
Yep.
Sevenoaks, and it became One Oak overnight in
Oh my
1987,
gosh.
and it was literally this very, very similar. What came in the other day. So
Sure.
and we've got
Yep.
more wind coming in tonight. So anyway, talking of sort of storms and bad weather, what's the worst sort of situation you've had with weather or conditions when you've been running one of these trips?
Okay. Anyone that's watching and yourself, Rob, have you know the Drake Passage.
Yeah.
So from southern tip of Argentina, Ushuaia, two ways to get to Antarctica, of course. So if you're going that way, you go through the Drake Passage, and it's called either the Drake Lake or the Drake Shake. So I've had two amazingly calm trips, amazingly calm. One was, okay. One of them, what was it? Probably the third trip. I'm thinking about 4 years ago. We all of a sudden there was an announcement. The ship had stopped. The captain said, "Everybody meet out on the decks now." Like, we thought, okay, bells were happening, the alarm, and then the ship started turning. And he basically said, "Look, we are going to be hammered if we go to where we predicted. We're going to be hammered. We need to outrun the storm." Well, we didn't really outrun the storm, and I can honestly say, with about 160 to 80 guests, the following morning for breakfast, there was 11 of us. There was lots and lots of paper bags, and
Yeah.
it was tough, and it was getting hammered. And these Russian or Ukrainian or Croatian captains are incredible. I mean, they didn't seem perturbed, but boy, oh boy, that was something. And just to see it, and I was up on the deck as well, the bridge, where you can stand. The captain and the crew are there, and you can stand, and the waves are crashing, and I'm there photographing like crazy onto the bow, like just bang, really high, and every so often you get some massive one.
Yeah, that's a
tears come out.
professional at work. That is, yeah.
Yeah. Oh no, it was fun. Yeah. But a lot of these ships have got stabilizers. I mean, it's not too bad. And so many of the trips in when I say Africa, of course, I mean, I've been to lots and lots of different spots. So, Sabi in Kenya, Tanzania, Madagascar, Botswana, what else? A few more, Namibia. And the weather's been amazing, except I had one trip I'm fortunate. I've done a number of tours, as we talked about, to the gorillas in Rwanda. One of the best things I've ever done in my life, and I've been fortunate to take trips.
There's a picture we'll share in a minute.
Yeah, sure.
Well, I'll tell you what. While we're chatting, I'm going to add your pictures to the
sure.
equation. So we'll start with that. We'll carry on chatting, Michael.
No problem. But basically, it was absolutely pouring, and the gorillas kept moving up. They were feeding, so we spent hours and hours through mud and rain and humidity. And I had a number of ladies on my trip, and honestly, they were starting to lose it. And all I kept thinking was, I'm about to see the descendants of Dian Fossey's Gorillas in the Mist, the greatest natural show on earth for me. And these people were whinging. And in the end, the guides were great. They carry a bag for some 10, 15 US dollars. They were pulling people up. There was mud sloshing. People came back wet and bedraggled and muddy. But of course, once they'd got a spirit or two into them and a hot shower and a dinner, and it was all fun. But I've had hot days as well. I've had unbelievable heat here and there that you just have to work around, and on bird tours, and you kind of give that day not a miss, but in a sense, a lot of the birds are sitting, on the edges of the trees, their wings out, trying to breathe.
So how do you prepare people for the sort of conditions that they're going to experience? Because this sort of brings us on to one of those areas we were going to talk about anyway. It's sort of preparing yourself for people that perhaps are out there that aren't experienced travelers who are thinking about that perhaps the sort of first trips. How do you prepare somebody for the condition? I mean, obviously it depends on where you're going. If you're going to the Antarctic, for example, your preparations are going to be very, very different from that perhaps of Africa or Rwanda or wherever you're going. How do you go about preparing your guests, as it were, your clients for those destinations?
Well, I have for a lot of the trips, for some of the companies, they basically look after the bookings, and for certainly all the Aussie stuff I do myself. But I have a form which is like a medical fitness form that people fill out. It is written in red and in bold that this is absolutely 100% private. No one sees it except for myself. If you send in a paper copy, which the odd person does, it's shredded. Otherwise, it's deleted. But if there's a trip such as the gorillas, I tell people, rather than assuming and like thinking, oh, great, another booking, I don't want to have someone on there that might have hip or back issues, or they're really, genuinely self-admittingly unfit. They haven't done a lot, and all of a sudden they're climbing kilometers up mountains in the rain. We've only sort of had a couple of those times, but generally, I just let people know. A lot of the tours that I present in Australia, I purposely don't. And seriously, Rob, this is quite funny. You would not believe how many people ask me, "Oh goodness, we see that you're a trail runner. You run up and down hills. What are your trips going to be like?" I can assure you that none of it.
They're intimidated by you.
Oh, it's terrible. I've created a rod for my own back. But I make it easier. Honestly, you have to walk. I mean, we drive around, we walk, but none of this crazy rock hopping and huge steep. There might be the odd occasion where I'll give people an option. It's something amazing. There's some lookout, and someone will say, you know what, I'm not really up to this. I'm going to stay for a few hours, photograph the fauna, the flora, and then you go up. Sometimes I'll have another professional guide with me, and we'll just flip a coin and we'll split.
So it's giving people options based on their abilities. Yeah.
But there's nothing worse. You really need to let people know what kind of terrain, what to expect, what the situation is, weather-wise. All of those things are really, really important.
And a good operator will prepare their clients, for the destination. So that presumably you've got lists of recommended kit in terms of clothing, in terms of recommendations for insurance, presumably, because we haven't talked about that either. And again, we'll get on to talk about equipment as well. Presumably you give advice, because not everywhere you're going to be taking the same kit, because one of the major problems I think is sort of cabin baggage allowance on, and this is this is a
Oh, boy, oh, boy.
problem that
Yes.
that will resonate, I'm sure, with a lot of people that are watching.
Yep. Yep.
That that sort of cabin baggage allowance is really restricting, because you're not going to put your £10,000 prime 500 or whatever lens
Correct.
into the hold baggage.
Yep. Yep. Exactly.
that's going to be clinging to you for the, literally, because it's it's going to get smashed to smithereens, because how
definitely
those bags are treated. But
in a previous life, which I jokingly say long time ago, I was working 20 hours a week as a quarantine officer in Australia. So if you flew in, I was one of the people that checked your bags, and then I did at least 40 plus hours on my business to get it up and running. And then, of course, many years now, many years full time. But it's interesting when you say that, the amount of things that I've seen smashed and broken, boy, oh boy. So I personally, I try to minimize as much as I can, but I'm always a bit over, and I'm not an argumentative person at all. But I've had a couple of occasions with airlines where they've weighed my bag. It was a couple of kilo over, or pounds, whatever, depends where you're from, folks, but £4, 2 kilo, which isn't a lot, but they've said, oh no, you have to put some in your suitcase. And I look at them without being rude or arrogant, and I say, folks, you're looking at $30,000 to $40,000 worth of gear. Seriously? Are you, I'd like to talk to a supervisor, and are you prepared to, be liable? And then it's like, well, okay, just be careful. And off I go. And I've only had one ever in, think about how long I've been doing this in tours, 18, 19 years. I had one lady, ironically, and oh my God, she was a demon, and she picked me and then no one else and then someone else. It was just the way it worked. And she would not give in any way, shape or form. Going to Norfolk Island, of all places, which is a part of an island off Australia. And I thought, oh, well, every so often you get a bad one.
Well,
but, I've learned.
I think you've been very persuasive.
Yeah.
I've never managed to persuade people.
Do you have what's called bum bags? Is that what you call them, Rob?
Yeah.
So they go around your waist with a zipper. So I've actually, just a couple of little hints here. I bought some black bum bags, and for example, a 70 to 200 2.8. I'm a Nikon user. And most of the brands you'll appreciate, like the size,
have a lens like that.
It'll go into that bag, and I can have it because legally I can have a camera around my neck. I can have a bum bag, but they don't want it all in the one bag. So I've taken that bum bag along many a time and not used it, but I've got it there just in case.
Yeah,
I'm not a great. It's not a great look. Some of these, the vest, bit of a safari suit vest, but I've got one of those as well. A Scotty vest, and that can be handy for an iPad and a couple of lenses and things like that.
Yeah, because
so
you can put them in your pockets and you can have them about your person.
And
that's actually quite a good. That's actually quite a good tip. Should we talk about some of your pictures? Should we run through the African stuff? So
yes,
obviously this is Africa. Whereabouts?
This was in Tanzania. So one of the places some of you out there may have been before. If not, it's incredible. Ngorongoro Crater. And it's this unbelievable haven that's protected for a huge number of wildlife. And there are, at the time that I went in, the first time, March 2015, there was a dozen what we call military assault teams, seriously, with rifles all along the top, because the poaching is just such an issue. And they've got satellite. It was actually donated. I think it was the Americans. Satellite gear, 24 hours a day. But these animals, I mean, they're just everywhere, like a smorgasbord. It really is incredible. I mean, a zebra, we've seen zebras, but that beautiful black and white, I turned it into a monochrome image, as you can see. But it's when you've got them so close to your vehicle. I photographed them with their babies. I photographed just their hide. They all have a different pattern. It's a bit
like a fingerprint, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. But an incredible experience. I got to photograph, and one of the things I really wanted many years ago when I first went to Africa was a elephant puffing dust, for example. And
let's get on to it. There's an elephant for you.
Yeah.
Well, not puffing dust.
No, this is a young male elephant that was. I think his testosterone was carrying on a bit. because he didn't like the fact that we were there in the vehicle. And these African guides that we have are in, I think this is Kenya, sorry, this was in Kenya.
Yeah.
They're amazing. They are just so knowledgeable. They can't do enough for you. But I saw the guide and he kept looking and in his review mirror, and this was a young male elephant and he was doing the whole, the sound with the trunk, and honestly, it feels like that we were going to get blown out of the car. Like he was really not happy. Started a bit of a run, and of course our guide's ready, bang, with his foot, and off we went. But
it's important, isn't it, to organize these things with people that know the animals well, so they know their behavioral patterns, so
completely.
they can see when there's a potential issue with something, and to keep people as safe as they can. I was going to ask you, actually, one of my questions for you was what if you could only choose one lens, what would it be? But I guess, for Africa, if you could restrict it to one lens, what would your advice to people be in terms of lens choice to get the most out of it?
Sure. Yeah, no, thanks, Rob. I'm a big advocate of the prime lenses. Zoom lenses are very handy. Sure. Look, you can zoom in, zoom out. With a prime, it's a fixed length. But to be honest, something like I've taken a 600 4, 500 f4, but I've got at the moment a Nikon 500 5.6 PF lens.
The PF, yeah.
Yep, and half the weight, half the size, half the price. And a few trips I did to Africa and some of the polar regions, I took that lens, and that is my go-to lens. So unbelievably fine there.
Yeah, that's probably one of my favorite images that you sent me. I love that.
Funny. But it's so unbelievably fast and sharp, and I still use an SLR, a D850, but I've just...
we were chatting the other day. I'm jealous of this.
The Z9, which we talked about, and I'm just waiting for it to come in. And so for me, that is certainly that 500 PF, for a number of reasons. One is it's so much lighter and easier to carry on your back, but also getting through the airports.
Yeah, well, this goes back to what we were saying, doesn't it, about the airlines?
Yep.
And actually, the way the industry is going and the way technology is going, actually, it should make things easier for people. I guess the issue is the expense of that equipment. On top of the expense of travel, it becomes a really, really expensive hobby, or whatever you're doing. But for most people, it's a hobby, I guess. But I mean, have you seen the price of the new 400 from Nikon? The 2.8.
Trust me, I nearly fell off my chair.
Yeah, me too.
I may be a Nikon school tutor, but let me assure you, folks, I don't get a freebie.
No, I don't think anybody gets free gear.
I think something like you can also hire lenses. We've had people, if they're planning, a safari to Africa and spending all that money on flights and the tour and whatever, they hire for 2 weeks, and that can be a great idea as well. Of course, shooting wildlife's my passion, but in my kit, for example, I've got the 70 to 200 2.8 VR. I've got the 500 PF. I've got 24 to 70, and I've been playing around doing some wildlife and birds with a fisheye, very different. 8 to 15. I've got 2 macro lenses, 105 and 200 f4. So it depends on what kit. Tomorrow morning, for example, haven't been for a little bit. It's raining on and off, which is for me here, it's perfect. And I'm shooting macro, spider webs with rainbow colors coming through the web, early morning light.
What influenced you or encouraged you to do that, Michael? Was it anything to do with wild art? We had some really beautiful spiders webs, didn't we? Last time?
No. Yeah. I'm going to be truthful, and I'm absolutely inspired. But I've been doing this since pre-COVID. Because it's such an incredible. I mean, when you look at a spider web, and then you look at this amazing golden-colored spider, and then there's water droplets because it's rained, and then you get the sun coming through. And I love to experiment, and so I do have different shots like that, and I'm doing that tomorrow morning. On the way back, grab myself a cuppa. I've got my laptop hidden in the car, and then I do some work. Excuse me. But so back to your question, my absolute favorite lens at the moment is that 500 5.6 PF.
Yeah. So I'm going to share a comment from Naomi, who we sort of spoke to, well, she said hello earlier. I think better to spend more, go less, but have a better experience out there. Yeah. I think that's probably,
that's true. That's true,
yeah.
Naomi. I guess not everyone has the budget, but if you are spending all that money and photography is your passion, I know many people, even well before Wild Art was started by Rob here, but people like camera clubs. I mean, the reason they would go on my tours is to just get as many shots of different things and enter camera clubs, things like that. And people ask me on a regular basis, and just because I'm a Nikon school shooter, I don't just talk Nikon gear. And I can honestly say, I say to people, buy what you can afford and justify. You'll never regret it. So good advice there. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah, well, this is something slightly different. I mean, so,
yes.
well, explain the background to this image, Michael.
Well, I have been dealing with heritage expeditions based in New Zealand for a number of years. I've been to the Russian Arctic with them. They've been leasing a particular ship for 20-something years. And in a nutshell, something happened. It wasn't available. So the company, the two brothers that run the company, ended up leasing the Kapitan Klebnikov, the amazing, that what you're looking at, the icebreaker. And so if you look in the photo, you can't tell, but being Brits, being a Brit yourself, Rob, Mark Carwadine is actually there in the black.
Oh, is he? That's Mark, is it? Yeah, I don't know Mark.
Yeah. So
yeah,
he was on the ship. I was with my guest, and this is a place that blew my mind. I mean, I've experienced a lot around the world, around Australia. But when I say this place, if anyone has either heard of or been there, I'm talking about Wrangel Island.
Yeah,
Wrangel Island is just, they call it the polar bear maternity ward. In Svalbard, which I love, we've seen anywhere from 11 to say 19 bears. We saw on this trip 54, including mother and cub, coming right up to the ship, reflections, just a great experience. And and they're all starting up again. It's great. But that, and these are the kind of zodiacs we travel in. We obviously, for those that haven't been, I don't assume that everyone knows. You live on the ship, you sleep on the ship, you eat on the ship, you drink on the ship. There's lectures and all sorts of things. And then you get out either onto the Zodiac, which you can see here. We cruise around the water, or we all get dropped off on land, and then we go searching. But if there are bears on land nearby, obviously there are protocols, and you basically stay in the Zodiac. You shoot from the safety of the water.
What's your favorite destination?
I've been asked this so many times, and this was not pre-planned, folks, I can assure you. I have two destinations. So one of them, if you look at the actual landscape and the wildlife together, nothing beats South Georgia on the way to Antarctica. It is beyond belief.
We've got a picture of you somewhere. Yeah.
That's the one.
There you go.
No, I didn't, of course, I
didn't plan that, folks. Honest.
Yeah, this wasn't pre-planned, not at all. But this actually, if you look at the background, it's like viewing the Swiss Alps, and in one area alone, St Andrews Bay, you've got an estimated 400,000 king penguins. There are seals. It is just incredible. And so to spend 4 days there on average, and then on to Antarctica. I never have cloned an image in or out. That's just me. I will not be critical of anyone, but this is not cloned. A fellow not on my tour had actually set this up. I thought it was amazing because he had the strap. It showed the Nikon. It wasn't planned. I certainly didn't lift this penguin. It's not stuffed like a certain winner of UK's Natural History Wildlife Photographer who used a stuffed anteater. I'm sure some of you remember that. But hey, this was just a moment, and I thought, I can't believe it. It's and it was looking at itself in the reflection. It is, of course, a king penguin. But so South Georgia is my favorite as far as location, wildlife. Just wow. I've been a few times, thankfully. The greatest single wildlife experience I've mentioned, nothing comes close, is being meters from the gorillas in Rwanda. So there you go. That's, to me, they're the two. There are plenty more. I can talk more, but later. But South Georgia, only 8,000-ish a year people go there. That's it, out of 7.5 or whatever billion of us on the planet. So to do this as a job,
yes,
I feel blessed.
So my sort of, I guess, sort of maybe top of my bucket list in terms of species to see is I'd love to see a shoebill.
Yes.
What's on your list? What's top of your list that you haven't seen?
I would love to go to Costa Rica to photograph some of the amazing birds. To see macaws in the wild on a mud bank, getting the minerals out. You know, things like getting them flying. Now with the incredible new release with Olympus, the Canon R5, of course, Nikon Z9, the eye activation. It's another world. You know, the chances. And so I love wildlife, birds in flight. You know, jaguars, things like that. I was in India, and unfortunately, it was a great trip, but I did experience some things that I thought were quite disappointing. Sighting of one lion and 30 cars racing and revving to surround this animal.
Yeah,
and I found that uncomfortable.
We during one of the sort of because we've been researching Sri Lanka as a possible location maybe to go at the end of the year, Jennifer and myself, and one of the things that one of the things that it's quite famous for is blue whales, and that's another one of my. I've never seen a blue whale, and I think if I ever did see one, I think I'd break down in tears, quite frankly. It has that much.
I'm glad you weren't on the last two Antarctica trips, Rob. I'm not rubbing it in, but right there, 2 a.m, call came out. It's still light. Bang, right there. Amazing. The largest mammal on Earth. Insane.
Yeah, well, Sri Lanka is a really good, as you probably know, is actually a really good place to go and a really reliable place to go and see them. But, when you look at some of the, when you sort of research it and you look at some of the stuff on YouTube, then it's exactly that. You've got all these boats converging on this animal, and you just think, I'd love to do that. But then there's this sort of other part of me saying, well, actually, you're then, affecting that animal potentially as well. Exactly. So I don't know, a bit conflicted.
Yeah, absolutely. If I can go back to somewhere like Kenya, there's a series of camps known as Kachechi, and they've got 4 camps, unbelievably well run, in all ways. But you're there, and the most you'll ever have with you, like we'll have 2 vehicles. So my thing when people come on tours of mine, nobody has what we call the middle seat. You always have a window seat, plenty of room for your gear next to you, but you'll have 3 vehicles. That's the most you'll ever see together. Whereas this experience, I saw a lot of amazing things, the people and the food and the landscapes and the wildlife. Please, India is incredible, but that's just, I couldn't help but just thinking, oh my gosh. And, I can't point fingers, but I know as a fact that some of the very, very wealthy clients say to their guides, you have no idea what I'm going to give you if you get me front row with a tiger. Yeah. These people are so passionate, but they're not earning a lot of money. When somebody waves $100 US in front of you, and that's what I saw. And I was with my guests, and I really, first time ever in nearly 19 years of running photo tours, I was really uncomfortable.
It's a hell of a temptation, isn't it? It's a hell of a temptation to compromise your principles. If you're in that situation and the financial reward is so great.
Yes.
I understand that. So Naomi sort of made a couple more comments. So top of my list, first of all, she says, this is absolute torture for me, but great to listen to. I think it's probably want to be out there and go to these places.
Sorry, Naomi. Sorry.
Top of my list are narwhals and beluga whales.
Wonderful.
And she also says she's seen a blue whale. Oh, well, there you go. You've seen something I haven't. I'd love to see one. I'd love to see one, but one day when things get back to normal.
So Naomi, with the last Russian Arctic trip, before we actually left, we had belugas right next to us on the little ship that we transferred, and it was incredible. We were there just watching them, belugas, really close. And no matter how many wildlife I've seen and I've photographed and experienced, I mean, you're just in awe. I don't think I took many shots. It was just like, oh my God, fantastic. Oh, there he is. Yes.
Yeah, there he is. I thought I'd move that on but anyway, Naomi says I've swum with orcas.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
That's the
great.
that's the other. Well, it sort of reminds me almost that sort of swimming experience where you're actually immersed in their environment. We go back to Chaba Tokoli's amazing whale shark image for the overall
Oh,
winner from Wild Art,
absolutely.
and that
Yeah.
that sort of situation again is one of those. If you saw that chat that I had with him, during the awards presentation, again, that's one of those situations where you've got the very fact that these animals are there.
Yep.
And they've got so much interest from tourism, which is bringing in,
Yep.
lots of money to the local economy. That's
Yep.
a good thing because it's stopped people killing these animals where they make their
Absolutely.
make their
Yeah.
living from killing them. They're now making
Yeah.
their living by showing people the animals and getting them into close encounters with them. But that very
Yes.
process is having another effect where delaying their migration potentially because they're hanging around for longer and enjoying all the free
Of
food.
course.
So
Yeah.
it's a very different. I mean, it's a much better
Mm.
situation, I think, to actually have these animals alive. But we must
Mm.
be aware that even as photographers, and even as as you as a tour guide, have a responsibility,
Absolutely.
to
Yep.
minimize the impact that we have. But I think the great thing about the photo tour industry is we are creating images like this to show the world what's how fantastic these animals are and how we should be
Yes.
protecting them, but also telling the story about what's actually happening.
Yep.
So
That's right.
good, positive or negative, and there are some positive stories out there. I
Yes.
think the whale shark potentially is one of those, but also the negative side of things is to open people's eyes, and
Yep.
I think that's one of the good things about the photo industry. And the other thing is, I've always said, if you're looking at something like a lion, this sort of apex predator,
Yep. Yep.
how many times can you shoot it with a camera? It's
Yep.
infinite. How many times can you
Yes.
shoot it with a rifle?
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
I've always said that. And
Rob, can I give an example of exactly what you've said about the whale sharks and Chaba's, amazing shot? But in Rwanda, that is the most amazing example. The guides who are with us, the patrol who patrol for poachers, a lot of those are either ex-poachers, poaching gorillas for meat,
Yeah.
and there hasn't been a poaching. I'm talking about Rwanda. And look, in the last year, I'm not sure, but certainly up until 2 years ago, there hadn't been a single gorilla poached in Rwanda for over 12 years. It employs thousands and thousands of people directly. Everyone from those guides, the fellows and what they do, they all turn up. There might be 50 of them dressed in their nice sort of clothes. And we then pick and say, yeah, we'd like 3, we'd like 4. And they are really happy to earn that $10, $15 to carry our bags. It's a way of making a
Mm.
living. The rest go home the next day. Those that have already earned money, they go to the back and they give the next fellows a go. And the other thing, which I think is remarkable, I mean, that when you think how anywhere in the Western world does this happen, I really don't know. But at the end of each week, they put all the money together earned by the guides, whether they earn or not, and it gets equally distributed. I
Yeah.
just think that's remarkable. And
Well, that's amazing sort of
yep,
camaraderie, isn't it? That sort of feeling. And the other
yep,
thing I think with these sorts of situations, that it's not just the gorillas that benefit from this, because
mm,
not only do you need to protect the animals, but obviously you've got to protect the habitat that
that's right.
supports them. So
Yep,
and how many other species are dependent on that habitat?
exactly.
It is the protection of habitats, I think, that is the most important thing here, because it's
Sure.
no good just saying I want to protect polar bears or I want to protect gorillas. You actually have to think about this and say, well, no, I need to protect
Yes,
those
absolutely.
habitats that support them. And by
That's right.
doing that, you're protecting so many other things as you call it a byproduct maybe, but I
Yeah,
don't see it
yeah.
that way. But I guess you could use that phrase.
Sure.
Yeah.
And some people are negative. I've heard it where people say, "Oh, it's just a tourist thing, and you're upsetting the gorillas." Honestly, it couldn't be further from the truth. Do you know it all, Rob, or anyone watching? 1 hour a day is the maximum. The
That's
gorillas get
yeah,
23 hours a day on their own. They get 1 hour a day. They rotate around as well. If there's a newborn or if there's a bit of something happening, they won't take you to that group. And when Diane Fossey originally studied them and sat with them for weeks and months and listened to them and talked, in a sense, habituated them. I mean, there's a group called the Agashu group, the most famous group. So anytime there's a president, prime minister, a king, a multimillionaire, that's the group they get. And my guide, so I've done 3 trips and 3 separate years, and then 2 trips each time, 6 times. And on the last one, he was so excited. He just came racing down and he said, the Agashu group, they're not turning up. The whoever, the politicians are, do you want it with your group? And I was like, wow. Honestly, it was the most remarkable hour of my life. It was
yeah,
beyond. The silverback male with his females, with the young ones of all ages playing, and we're standing in the middle. And it's meters. It's not, honestly, I had an issue a few times, and my guests where they were too blooming close. And
yeah,
then you sit down and the babies come and they pull your shirt and you just sit there. And I've got hairs on my back of my neck stand up, and it's brilliant. But knowing how well it works, there's a co-op where they present things, they sing and they dance and they sell things for tourists. One of the fellows is quite old, but he was an original poacher, and he comes up and he dances for us and he sings, and then he gets some dollars, or whatever currency, depending on what country you're in Africa. But it's just incredible to see, and I really wish that could be used more than just, let's get as many as we can. Let's get and it's not infinite.
yeah.
There's no infinite number. Species can become extinct unless. The gorillas are a great example in Rwanda as to a perfect way to.
But a lot of this sort of the poaching is driven just by economics. I mean,
That's right.
it's people
Yeah.
trying to make a living, and
Yep.
it's not a bloodlust, if you like. It's just
Yep.
this is a way of making a living, and these are the pressures that these people face. And
And
if you
even
can
though,
if you can
yeah.
replace that with
Yep.
something which, like the gorillas, you're talking
Yep.
about a tourist industry where you're taking people to see these animals. Well, what an absolutely fantastic sort of thing
Yep.
that is, because
Yeah, absolutely.
okay, as we've said, a few minutes ago, there will always be consequences to actions that
Yep.
we take as human beings, but it's minimizing the impact that has on
Yep.
particular
Exactly.
populations, and trying
Yep.
to basically make the best of what you can out from it. But there are so many positives, and this is where I think, just sort of going into the photography competition side of things, because obviously that's what's sort of driving all of these live events and everything else.
Yes.
It's pictures that have, a bit like Trey Anfield's gorilla, you'll remember, from Eyes, that, and she was talking about that hour slot and how she basically
Yep.
gambled on that one shot for her whole hour there.
Yes.
These images bring these populations, these animals, to life for people, and
Absolutely.
whereas for me it's sort of blue whales and shoebills and things like that, because I've seen pictures of them.
Yep.
I've seen them on
Yep.
television. That's why I want to see them. I'm interested. I'm
Sure.
fascinated by the natural world. Of course, I want to see these sort of apex predators,
Yeah, definitely.
apex mammals in the in the case of a blue whale, because why wouldn't that's the sort of thing that sort of stirs me up.
Yep.
But I just
Exactly.
we've got such an important role, I think, as
Yes.
photographers, as people that
Definitely.
promote images of wildlife, to tell it as it is,
Sure.
and to use it in a positive way. So
I think just one very last one about the gorillas, which I didn't mention. There's often opposition to the huge fee that you pay for an hour. I mean, $1,000 for an hour, or even up 1,500, and it's a lot of money. But honestly, what that does, it really, you really want to make the effort to get there, to stay there, to spend that money to see them. But also that money just filters back. This is not somebody
yeah,
lining their pockets to have 3 limousines and a gold-plated pool. It's just not like that at all. It's so
no,
I think, to me, that's a shining example And you must remember that genocide was only just over 20 years ago.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Horrendous.
obviously you and I will remember that clearly.
Yeah,
We're
and
of
the
an age
fact that
where,
they've come back so amazingly well with
yeah,
an incredible president who once a month rolls his sleeves up and goes out with the locals and picks up rubbish. I mean, and you know, it's clean. And I mean, there are issues in other countries in Africa, sadly, but certainly from my experience, Rwanda was just amazing people,
yeah,
amazing what they've done. But just getting back here to this fella, this was really the first time that I had seen a polar bear outside of a zoo, which was really awful when I was a child at a wonderful zoo called Taronga Zoo, which I'll be there in 2 weeks actually presenting a wildlife photography workshop. But I used to see the bears in a pit, and
yeah.
they would
I
walk
think a
up
lot
and
of
the
people
polar bears.
will,
Yep. Up and
yeah,
down, right, up and down, so many times over so many years that they wore a channel into the concrete. It was awful, and
yeah,
they've got rid of all that. But in the wild, like yourself, I mean, to see a shoebill or a blue whale, Rob. I mean, it would be exciting for you, but for me, this was one of those moments
yeah,
where not only a polar bear, we saw a lot in the distance, and you use your camera or binocs, but then this one just came right up to the ship. I mean, this is right up to the ship. It's a young one jumping. I managed to get that. It's all about pre-setting things, getting ready, making sure you've got your exposure right, because you've got a white goldie bear with ice and whatever, a high shutter speed, up your ISO a bit, get ready, and then just bang, continuous focus, continuous shutter, release,
yeah,
and it's an incredible experience to see. And then I've seen images by people like Paul Nicklin, one of the most incredible photographers, and he's doing so much to help preserve and promote. But he's got shots of bears as well, tiny little a bear on little bits of ice,
yeah.
and it's just disappearing. And that's another reason I'm glad, that we can still go out and see these animals and still visit, because that ice is melting quick. This is not, a greenie sitting here and whatever
Yeah.
bashing across the brow. I mean, it's
And
obvious. It's
I think
really
the other
happening quick.
the other thing about sort of, we were talking about the sort of financial aspect of things, is what price can you put on memories? I mean,
Yep.
okay, so you buy a new camera, you can break that. That can be stolen. That can be taken away from you.
Yep. Yep.
Nobody can take your memories away from you, and they're some of the
Absolutely.
most precious possessions that you have in your life, because they're what shape you as a person.
Yep.
And
Yep.
we were talking about hair standing up on the back of or you were earlier. That's
Yep.
what makes my hair stand off the back of my neck,
Yep.
is thinking
Yep.
of those sorts of things. And
Yep.
yeah, wouldn't we all love the new 400 from Nikon, right? But at £13,500, that ain't going
Yeah.
to be a
Yeah.
reality for
Exactly.
me for a while. That is for
Yeah.
sure.
And me,
But
trust me. No. Yeah.
it's because it's just not. It's not it's not important enough to me. What's
Yep.
important is this sort of thing, is creating memories, is creating experiences, even if they're just local things. I mean,
Yep.
I had the most amazing, and I've talked about this before, and I'm sorry if I'm boring people with it, but with copulating, swans, where they did the mating ritual dance, and for one morning it was just a magical light. It was just the most amazing experience that I had last
Yep.
year, and I will never forget that. And that's on my doorstep.
Yep.
And but
Absolutely.
nobody can take that away from me. Anyway, Susie
I
Crow
think.
says, hi Susie. She says, fascinating information, guys. Well, I'm glad you're
Hi,
enjoying it,
Susie.
Susie. And if you've
Hi,
got any
Lauren.
question for Michael, then do make sure you ask it before we
Oh,
finish. But yeah,
absolutely. I think, and without in any way, it's not the time and place to delve in my past, but certain things that happened, and yeah, this is one from Antarctica,
yeah.
rugged up
So
like a polar
talking
bear.
about rugged gear, yeah,
Yeah, but just briefly, I mean, one of the things that I decided, I had a very, very stressful thing happen in my life, and I decided that no matter what, that I would end up doing something where every single morning I get up and I go, "This is great. I'm going to work." My brother, my wife, my family, friends, running mates. I mean, I can go on and on. That doesn't happen often. Yes, I've worked hard and long hours, of course, and low money and jet lag and nights after night on the computer late. But to then finally get to a point and to be doing what I absolutely love, and exactly what you said, Rob, literally every photo you're showing me, and anyone out there that has photos, of course, they're your experience. to me, like, I know where I was. I know that in half an hour after this shot, it was a blizzard. Like, it was cold, and I'm right up there. I know with that polar bear jumping, it was my first ever, like I mentioned. I know all these different things. And even though I'm a pro photographer and I've been teaching tutoring for many years, people find this side, but I mean it with utmost honesty, that if I get a shot, a good shot, that's great. To me, it's the experience. If I get a corker, I spoke to you about my shoot where I photographed a particular thing, 221 shots, and 2 of them were good and one was decent. But
that's the normal read.
That's right. But the experience, and I look back, and I've done a few slide presentations to camera clubs just recently, as you know, and 2 nights in a row in Zoom in different states. And every one of those shots, I was like, oh my God, I remember that. Oh, wow. And it kind of gets me, and like we said earlier, the COVID side of it and restrictions, I think there is a new sense of appreciation for certainly many people I've spoken to. And the comment I get repeatedly is, I don't think I'll take things like this ever for granted. Simple things like getting on a plane, so.
I hope that's something that that's something that COVID has done for us in a positive way.
Yes,
has made us appreciate things a lot better. Certainly, I think made people appreciate things on their own doorstep. So Naomi says, my thing is, on your deathbed, you're never going to say, "Darn, I wish I'd saved those pounds." Well, this is it. There's no point in being the richest person in the graveyard, is there?
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's sort of taking those opportunities while you can and experiencing them while you can. And I think COVID has really focused the sort of mind's lens in on that, to want to use a sort of photographic analogy. As the older we get, the less time we've got. It's a simple fact.
Absolutely.
And I think, and actually the less quality of life you have as well, because it's not just about how long you're going to live. It's how long can you stay fit? How long can you be able to do these things? And I've been sort of talking about sort of just taking one camera and one lens out a lot just recently. And that's simply because for years and years and years carrying a heavy rucksack, I'm starting to get degeneration in the lower vertebrae in my spine. So I can't do what I used to do without consequences for days afterwards. So I adapt my behavior and the way I do things just to cope with it. And that's never going to improve, and presumably there'll be other things happening, I'm sure, as I get older. So it is seizing the moment. And I think that's what COVID has focused people in on.
Absolutely.
And I think that's why the sort of future of the travel industry, certainly in the sort of short to medium term, is very, very healthy. And I think the photo travel industry can do a lot of good for conservation. And we've kind of touched on that, but not really sort of focused in on it, too heavily. But so how do you see the next sort of 2 or 3 years?
I guess, look, as you know, no one's got the crystal ball. I'd be loath to sort of say what's going to happen, but I guess the hope, touching on what we said earlier, the hope, if you think of Alpha and then Delta and then Omicron, I mean, each time they become more virulent and not as strong and not as, the word? Not as
severe.
Severe. Sorry. And it's looking good. And I just feel with all the different, policies, protocols, safety, all that sort of put in place, getting out there, I just think it's coming back, and borders are opening, airlines, things are happening again. Another issue, of course, is when you pay, like at the moment, you mentioned, what was your fuel? £2?
It's 150. It's 150 a litre at the moment. Yeah.
That also affects. Think of how much a plane from somewhere like Australia to the UK, let's say. It affects fares, things like that. But the quality, I see it. It's healthy. I mean, the people that are out there, and the ones that have survived, they'll do anything they can to get people out there. Just looking at this photo, this was actually, I mentioned a mother and a cub. This was in Svalbard, and I was up top, and I purposely, I do this sometimes to give you a perspective of, wow, how close are they? And with that amazing aqua reflection. For anyone that doesn't know, an iceberg, no matter how little or small, is way bigger below the surface.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so you have the bear and the reflection and the people photographing. And this is Wrangel Island. So, and again, it kind of feels like it was such a long while, but and carefree. And you know, most people, unless it was your profession, I mean, let's be honest, most people had not really heard of COVID. And then it was just bang, it hit us. And imagine if it was just a UK, let's say just an English thing, and borders were shut, and we'd be looking, going, oh my God, the poor, you know, English, blah, blah, blah. But this is a worldwide thing.
Yeah.
You name me a country, if you can, that hasn't been affected. I mean, even New Zealand, sure, they've got low case numbers of deaths, but
they've still been affected. Yeah.
Well,
but I
3
mean,
days ago.
Yeah, I mean that's the country that everybody thinks of initially, isn't it? New Zealand.
Yeah. But they've got 1,500 cases 3 days ago. It's happening. Sorry, just a dry mouth here.
Yeah, no, always have water on hand.
Yes, yes.
People know I drink regularly. Trouble is, what happens is after a while you go on for a bit. It makes me want to pee.
Yeah, that's right.
That's always a downside.
I nearly had a beer.
Sorry, people.
No, I won't be the Aussie with the beer. I know Georgina had a glass of wine. That was allowed. But I thought
she had more than one, Michael.
What's that?
She had more than one.
Yeah, I know that, but I was being polite.
Well, I normally have something, but it's still a little early for me.
Not here.
Yeah,
20 past 10.
No, exactly. No, it's just gone. Well, it's 20 past 12 here, so no, still a bit early. Yeah,
that's
still a bit early. We've got stuff to do today.
Exactly. Do you have any more photos, or did we?
We got any more? Let's have a little look. Oh, I think that's the last one. Yeah.
Oh, no,
South Georgia again, is it?
Yes, and this shows. I mean, this is one of the guides on the ship. He let me take his photo, and seriously, he's surrounded. He just walks in amongst them, and I wanted to show. There's a person, and obviously, yeah, it's incredible. And but having people in, you know, when you're traveling, if you like that sort of thing as a memory, really, but get people to take a shot or two of you in the whatever environment you're in. And if you're in Africa,
often forget that. We often forget that, don't we? There's so many other people around with cameras.
I've been mentioning it to my guests many a time, and I'll take shots, they take shots, and then we'll share them at the end as well. So
fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what's the let's have a look, see if I've got any more questions.
Yeah, no, all good.
I think you probably okay. What was the first camera? Can you remember the first camera that you bought? You remember what that was?
I actually was a Canon user for 3 years. Oh no. I got a Praktica when I was young. I didn't really do much with it, and then I got a Ricoh film cameras, and then I bought Canon. It was a Canon A1. And then a documentary maker that I introduced to my mentor, who also I mentioned makes documentaries. I introduced the two guys together, and then I'd go along, and there was 3 of us, 2 doing documentaries, and then I was doing stills. And the fellow Dave needed money for a new editing suite, and he said, I've got Nikon. I'll sell you an F90X camera with lenses, blah, 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 with a backpack for whatever it was. And you know, pretty poor back then, and I just got the visa out, and I never looked back. Yeah. Now I can't use anything else because I'm actually legally, I'm a Nikon school shooter, but I'm really happy. I'm stoked. But,
yeah, I mean, I shot Canon to start with, and then I changed allegiance a few years ago.
Yes,
and I haven't looked back with. Well, I have to say, I was getting, because obviously people know, but we will talk about cameras just briefly. I'm going to mention this because I think people this week have seen the announcement from OM System, formerly Olympus, about the new OM1, and that is what's being offered along with 2 lenses, which they haven't told me about yet.
Oh, fantastic.
for the best portfolio prize. So that, if you've seen the reviews, the initial reviews online, do check them out. It looks like an amazing piece of kit. I know Andy in particular, Andy Rouse, has been eulogizing about it.
Yes.
So yeah, check that out. That is what is on offer from Olympus, and we'll be doing a few things with them over the
Fantastic.
coming sort of weeks and months. Hopefully, I'm talking to them about that at the moment. So, but yeah, going back to Nikon briefly, was I, they were out of the game in terms of mirrorless. I felt, because I
Yep.
never felt
I have
that
to agree.
the Z6
Yep.
and the Z7 really kept up with what Canon were doing and what Sony were doing, what even Olympus were doing. But the Z9, from what I understand, is a piece of kit that's just going to blow anybody away that
Yep.
that uses it. So yeah, I think they're back in the game. I'd certainly like to
Very
check
much.
one out. But it's going back to money again. That's it's an expensive piece of kit again.
Exactly.
But, yeah.
Yep.
So
But
Naomi says, thank you for absolutely ruining my day, making me think about photography expeditions. Haha. But very good talk. Thank you so much. Well, that's an absolute pleasure, Naomi. And
thanks, Naomi.
and
That's
Susie
great.
Crow says, yes, super excited as I'm an Olympus shooter.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Well, as I said, I'm trying to organize a few things with Olympus to come on, and perhaps I'll come on here and chat about that a little bit. And people will know that there are a lot of Olympus users on the judging panel too. So hopefully we'll get a few of those on, and we'll start talking about some of this kit as well. That's kind of the plan.
Absolutely.
But yeah,
having taught all brands for many years, that's something I say. And there's some incredible. I mean, Fuji. You talk about Olympus, and we mentioned, of course, Nikon and Canon, Panasonic, and Pentax and Fuji. I mean, there's some great cameras, but when you finally see, Canon stepped up big time. The OM1 you've just mentioned, and I read some of the reviews, and I've been, reading some of them.
And actually, that would be a really good system choice, wouldn't it, for traveling, when we were talking about baggage restrictions on planes and things like that.
Yes.
Such a compact system, and in terms of weather sealing as well, it's probably one of the best systems on the market for that.
Yeah.
And I'm not just saying that because obviously they sponsor the competition, but this is what I've understand and what I've seen online. What a great choice what a good choice it could be for people to consider. But obviously, it's all about budgets that people have available, I guess. But
absolutely. Yeah. And the thing is, I mean, use the gear that you have to the best of your abilities. As someone who collects all the different portfolios, I got my wild art portfolio, by the way.
Well, I was going to talk about that actually, because I know it arrived. Yeah. The book arrived.
How about we talk at the end about it? Remind me, and I'll tell the story. Okay. But no, use the gear that you have to the best of its abilities. I've been saying that all along. I know people that are gear collectors, and there are even people out there. Absolutely, I mean, 100%. They'll say, "Oh, I'm going to wait until the Z7 comes out." I'm saying Nikon, and then the Z7 too. No, I'm going to wait because I've heard rumors of the Z9, and now there's the rumors of the Z8, and you just think, literally buy what you can afford and justify. Just to repeat that. Use it and learn it to the best of its abilities. And I mean, this is not showing off in any way, but honestly, you could blindfold me and I just know my camera backwards. I mean, I know every setting,
but I don't have to think. That again is important to get the best out of it in a situation, is to not be fumbling around for the controls when you've got
something's happening
going off in front of you. Yeah.
Yep. So learn the camera, learn the gear. The fact that I talk about it, teach, write about it, it's such a huge part of my life and has been for many years, of course. I honestly don't need to think of settings. I just do it, bang, it's in instinct, and then I can hopefully get the amazing shot or the behavior or whatever. Whereas some people will spend all their time just thinking, well, how I haven't picked it up for 6 months. Use what you have.
Talking about the book, and I did want to do something on
on
older equipment as well, and how you can still use that and get some exceptional pictures. So it's almost sort of wildlife photography on a budget, if you like, because not everybody, including me, has got a spare £5,000 just to go and buy the Z9, for example. And then, as we were talking about earlier, that lovely 400 lens that we'd all like.
Yes.
That's that sort of top end of so it's quite daunting, I think, for people when they look at the sort of sums of money that people are are shelling out for these things. But you can do it on a budget. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the D800E that I still shoot with, for example, other than it's not, the autofocus is nowhere near what the Z9 is going to do. The frames per second is nowhere. So I know all the advantages of having that system. But if you're photographing things like fungi and plants, for example, what difference does that make? It doesn't. It's when it's in those other situations. Excuse me. So I was going to do something about sort of wildlife photography on a budget, which I think would be perhaps quite a popular thing. But going back to the book, and if you read my introduction to the book, for those that have it, I always say that older equipment in skilled hands produces far better results than new equipment in the hands of the inexperienced. And this is going back to what you said about knowing your kit, and what I said earlier about practicing on local species and knowing those species and knowing how your camera reacts. And even conversations I've had with Georgina about exposure metering modes, for example. And the fact that she and I maybe assume that you do the same, use that evaluative metering for the vast majority of what we do, simply because we know we can take in the sort of scene in front of us and realize how the camera is going to try and meter it, so we can then put in some compensation ourselves just based on experience of that camera and how it meters similar scenes in the past and the mistakes we've made. And learning is all about making mistakes. Is fine, because you learn far more from the mistakes you make than the things you do well.
Absolutely. And, Rob, if I can mention too, the thing with and I was leading just briefly to books, and I have some of the other natural history, or used to be called BBC Wildlife.
The wildlife photography books.
I talked to you the other day, Rob, and anyone out here still listening and observing, my wife will go to bed early, I'll be up for a little while, and I'm collecting them. I've got a majority of them, and I get inspired. And if you look at some of those winners, and the same with wild art, which I only received a few days ago, the book of last year's winners, etc. I mean, some of the great shots, exactly what you said. They're basic, intermediate, entry level. It's using it to the best of its abilities, and of course, if you can justify and afford, as I normally say, great. But otherwise, some of the great shots that have been taken around the world have been taken on cameras that are quite a few years old. So don't always think I'm waiting for the next thing. Just get on out there. Definitely.
I think maybe the other thing to say is it's don't always think that this new equipment is all of a sudden going to revolutionize you as a photographer. It's the most important thing that we all have as creators, as photographers, is what's in here, and the way and what we see, and the way we process that information, and the way we know our systems well and have a vision for what we want to try and create. It's right. Exactly. I mean, excuse me, an artist won't sit down at an easel and not know what he's going to, or he or she is going to paint. They already have that vision in their minds. And it's the same with photography. Exactly the same. Sorry. my voice is starting to pack up.
Get that water. One of the things too, just going back to the book, and I ordered something locally from Brisbane, and it's now in its 8th day. And I live in Brisbane, so we're talking 15 kilometres away. You can't pick it up, you post it. And yet Rob posted, wonderfully packaged, the book, and I received it. It was either the 4th or 5th day.
It was amazing. I was surprised when you said you'd got
across the world. And honestly, for anyone out there that would like, a coffee table book, it's sublime. I tip my hat to you, Rob. The quality, absolutely. The quality of the printing, the layout. And I sort of said to Rob, do you sleep? It's so much work. I really highly, I can see Susie. Hi, Susie. My book arrived this week. Amazing. I'm just thrilled to sort of be a part of, wild art or wild vision, a wild read. I've written a few articles as well. Rob might mention that briefly later, and the competition as well. But honestly, that if you want to get inspired, look what others do, read the settings, but then don't copy exactly. Last year's winner, in my opinion, don't copy exactly that. Go do something different. Get an idea, some guidance, but experiment. That's what's kept it fresh for me after nearly 26 years. Doing all sorts of abstract, and I mentioned the fisheye for wildlife and birds, and having a remote and behind a tree and the bird flies down, bang, and I get the shot. It's different, and it really is enjoyable because I'm not just out there photographing the nice bird on the tree and processing, and I've done that over the years. But there's always something out there, no matter where you are. Really, I'm in.
Well, we were talking about the storm coming through, weren't we? A couple of days ago. Excuse me. And that in fact, I did a little video yesterday, which I filmed, but then the heavens opened, so I'm going to have to finish it another day. But it was all about, yes, there's a bit of devastation in the wood, but it brings new opportunities. And of course, there are all these lovely mosses and lichens that are normally high up in the tree canopy, but because they've all been blown down, they're now accessible. And some of the colors are amazing. I did put a shot on my
was that
Instagram
a shot
feed.
you did just the other day? I commented.
I put it on my I put it on my Instagram feed yesterday.
I loved it. Loved it.
So look at that. Rob Reed Photos is the handle. I think most people on here probably follow me. But look at that. And that was just, and that was a focus stack, actually. That was something I don't normally do. And I just thought, I'd actually quite like all of this in focus. So I'd focus stacked about 6 images. And
Rob, just quickly, what program do you use for anyone interested?
For focus stacking, Photoshop.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So I mean, my workflow is I have Lightroom and I have Photoshop, and I normally do the sort of quick edits in Lightroom, and so I'll adjust exposure and saturation and clarity and all those sorts of things. I'll apply those in Lightroom, and then I'll export them into Photoshop, and I'll finish it off in Photoshop, and I'll do things like focus stack in Photoshop. Is all sort of relatively quick these days. So that's basically my workflow, but I know everybody's different. But
very good.
Michael, should we finish with a few? What are you? We didn't sort of. I didn't tell you we were going to do this, but sort of top tips. Shall we finish with some top tips if you're thinking about traveling?
Sure.
In the next, next sort of year or two, where we've still got sort of COVID hanging around in the background and making things a little awkward. What are your top tips for people?
I think that one of the ones that I mentioned earlier would be certainly an important one, is wherever you're going, and please remember, from the country you're at to the country. Not some people have made the mistake of looking on a website, say they're going to, here we are, going to Kenya. And then what ends up happening is their rules are different coming back in, for example. So you kind of need to know going and coming back what the rules are as far as like travel restrictions, etc. Packing light now with mirrorless. Talk about the Olympus, the OM1, and the Olympus system. It's sort of heading in that direction. I mean, the Nikons, the Canons, the mirrorless. They're working so hard to bring quality, lighter, smaller, but so minimize the gear that you have. If you've got problems with your back or your hips, or you're just getting a bit older and it's a little bit too hard to lug this heavy gear, even just take minimal. Take a couple of lenses. Don't take 4 lenses and 2 camera bodies, even though that's not a bad idea. Having a backup in case something happens as well. But as far as
I was going to say that always have an extra camera body. If you've paid all that money to go to these places and then your camera packs up, you are going to be as sick as hell. Absolutely. I can tell you, because it's kind of happened to me before.
I made the mistake, and it was a trip to Africa, and I had a good quality camera and a backup that was not as good, and something happened, and I was losing shots, and the focus system completely didn't work. So then I had the camera repaired years ago, and this is $700 Aussie. So what are we looking at? £300, whatever, 280, 300 at a guess. The next year, the same thing happened, even though it didn't happen all year. It's enough to make a grown man cry. So then I just went out with my Visa, 1, 2, and I bought 2 D850s, and I've never looked back. But having a backup, even if it's not at the same quality, just gives it, even if you don't use it, it gives you that insurance, I guess.
Yeah, it's sort of peace of mind, isn't it? That if
Yeah.
something does
And Rob,
happen.
you touched on earlier on, we'll mention briefly insurance. It's very important to have insurance, but not just household insurance, remembering that once you travel, depending on your policy, things change. But have your gear insured, whether it's for theft or damage. And obviously, if you're somewhere like Africa and you smash both cameras and lenses, you'd have to be unbelievably unlucky for that to happen. But if something happened at an airport, and I mean, it has happened, gear goes missing, insurance is very important. And by actually naming like the product and, the which type and the estimated value, that way you're covered, and then you can rebuy the same or the next. But I wouldn't be without it. I had only one issue in 25 years of needed travel insurance, and boy, oh boy, it was many thousands of dollars that I would have lost, and insurance paid. So I don't look at that policy and go, oh, there's another whatever.
Did you watch the live I did with Yari and Kaiser when we did their category thing, and I asked them what was the worst disaster they had, and Yari said he left a bag on a shuttle bus at the airport with all his gear in it. They got it back.
Never got it back.
Yeah,
no,
but these things can happen. I mean, we're all human, aren't we? So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Great. Okay, Michael, it's been a real pleasure. I think we've been. I said to you at the start, we'll try and keep it to an hour. We're an hour and 40.
I knew it wasn't.
Well, it always happens with me. Always, I can't, because the thing is with this sort of thing anyway, is why cut something short when you've got so much information to share with people. And this thing's going to stay up on YouTube. You can flip backwards and forwards and pick out the bits you want to listen to,
right?
But this is sort of packed with really good information and great advice. Plus, I think sometimes the chats are always really entertaining. So it's been a real pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Rob.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks for the suggestion, putting it together, and obviously the Wild Art family. It's growing, and I'm pleased to be a part of it in the sense, doing things like this. And I mentioned the articles and the writing, and it's great. And the people that I've met, like I guess through the lives, and I know Georgina. She's of course an Aussie here, and then others that I've met, and I start following their work. Andy Rouse, I've known his stuff for years and years and years, and Yari, and his wife as well, and it's just great. And for people to join in, it's there will be plenty more, and I know, Rob, but I encourage people to join in and get involved and ask questions. But it's been great. No, really.
Yeah, and as I said to people,
Alan, thanks, Libby. Oh, Libby's one of my customers from Brisbane. Hi, Libby.
Yeah, there's a few. So Naomi saying thank you. Yeah. Susie says thanks, guys. It's been a pleasure. Alan James, thanks, Rob and Michael. No, it's an absolute pleasure. And Libby, as you say, Libby Morton says thank you. Great chat. And this is the thing, as well as the competition, people have got the idea now that.
Yes.
For me, it's all about trying to help people on their journeys photographically, and with a Wild Vision, it's not just about photography either. I mean, Thursday this week, obviously, we've got a chat about toads with with Emily from Frog Life. So that's not going to be a photographic chat. That's going to be sharing some information about that species, about amphibians in general, mainly in the UK. But there's lots of things that you can take away from that. We'll be talking about Toad Patrol and those sorts of things.
But also a wild read as well. I mean, there are some great articles on there by all sorts of people from around the world, and it's I've written a couple, and happy to do more down the track. But for anyone out there that doesn't know, I mean, it's a wild read. It's free. Rob, you can obviously.
It's a quarterly e-magazine. It's kind of started life. I think a few people will know as something called Purple Crow, which I started back in lockdown.
That's right.
And talking about Toad Patrol, that's how it started. It started from me just sending the people that have been helping me out in Toad Patrol in the village just an image, a wildlife image, and with a bit of information about it. I mean, it was only like 100 words. I'd send it out every day just to keep people's spirits up, because I was so grateful. you know, for what they had done in Toad Patrol. And that's how it started. People were saying, oh, that's really great. So eventually it's morphed into this quarterly e-magazine.
Yes.
From, you know, people like you, and Georgina's written articles, and a lot of the other judges that we had, Josh and Gail, and, you know, all written articles for it. You know, anything from sort of photography to wildlife, anything like that, but it's sort of nature based. And
yeah, exactly.
You know, in fact, I've got to put the next one together because the next one's due in March. I haven't even thought about it yet. But anyway, I've got a few things, you know, lined up. So, you know, sign up for that. It's free.
Fantastic.
So that's what I want to do with the sort of wild art community, if you like, and a Wild Vision is part of that. So if anybody's got anything that they want us to cover, any subjects they want us to delve into, or, you know, they want to come on and talk about something, they'll send me an email and give me a suggestion. I mean, we've got some photographer portfolios coming up as well, where I've kind of nicked the idea from Desert Island on Desert Island Discs, you know, where it's a BBC thing, which, you know, they bring on famous people and they ask them to share 8 music tracks that they couldn't do without, if they sort of found themselves on a desert island. So I'm going to do this with photography. So we've got Andrew McLaughlin coming on, Canadian photographer who does lots of really good macro stuff. You've probably seen some of his stuff in the wild art top 100s. We've got Kuram Khan, who's based in the US. I've got a couple of others as well, all sort of lining up. So you know, we're doing that, and there'll be lots of other stuff. So, you know, as I said, hopefully we can do some stuff with Olympus, and, you know, maybe some of the other manufacturers as well. Who knows? But you know, it's those sorts of things that you know, that we'll be doing with a wild bit. And of course, don't forget the sort of pre-recorded videos, as I call them as well. I did something on photographing snowdrops, so I just take my mobile phone out and just film myself messing around in the woods. And I've done something on, you know, I said, you know, the sort of post storm damage, which I haven't finished yet, but there was I put something else together on birdsong. So it was me without my camera. In fact, I took Sky, my spaniel, and we just had a walk around the woods, and I recorded some of the songs and just was chatting away in general about sort of recognizing bird songs. So check that out. I'll put links. You know, I'll put links in the, you know, in the video after it's done. So, Michael, thank you very much.
You're welcome again.
Really, really great to talk to you. Hang on the line. We'll have a quick chat afterwards.
Yeah, great. Of course.
But now
I can fill up my empty glass.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Really good to talk. I've got an outro video that I will play in a second, but last thing to say, don't forget Thursday, Emily Millhouse from Frog Life. That's 6:30 UK time, 6:30 p.m. So do join us for that. That's going to be another great talk. And lastly, don't forget to buy your copy of Wild Art Photographer of the Year. I had to get that in at the end. Michael loves it, and I've had some really good feedback actually from people that have already received
very inspiring. More than anything, I'll say to folks, like, it just every page you just think, wow, inspiring. To finish off, Rob, before I go, I was saying to Rob when we sort of organized tonight, you can see them online on a phone or on a laptop or whatever, and they're great. I mean, but honestly, when something is printed in a book and the reproduction, the quality is just, it's brilliant. And there are shots there that I'd seen small, and now I'm like, oh my god, wow. So yeah, love it. Really, really great. So
you can't beat things in print, in my opinion, which is why the book was always an important element to the competition for me. You know, and this is something
who joined in tonight. It was good to see, and you know, people adding a few comments, and thanks everyone. It's been great. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, well, I'll play a quick outro. Thank you everybody for watching, and we'll see you again next time. So don't forget, next Thursday with Emily Millhouse from Frog Life. So from all of us, goodbye, and we'll see you next time.